for the record. Push the button there. Now you're on.
I'm Dr. Kathleen Ray. I'm a biomedical engineer. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering from Tulane University. Currently, I do consulting, but in the past, I have worked in research, science research at UAMS, at Tulane University, at the Swinburne University in Melbourne, Australia. I'm very familiar both with PCR testing and quite familiar with immunology. But I'm here today just representing myself and hopefully just to give you some facts and just what I've learned over the last few years with the research I've been doing that's related to this subject. So I want to start with, I don't know if you guys caught it, but just this week, and oddly on CNN, Biden's top COVID advisor, Dr. Michael Osterholm, stated that, these are his words, the paper or cloth face coverings that many people are wearing today are not effective in reducing any of the virus movement, either in or out. It surprised me to hear that on CNN. Didn't surprise me to hear it. The truth is, I never believed that masks could work, and I started looking back on what I knew about the physics of viruses and the physics of barriers, and so I just want to give you some of that information to think about for yourselves. It was determined early in 2020 that the size of the SARS-CoV-2 virus was somewhere between 0.02 and 0.25 microns. That's a thousandth of a meter. Whereas the pores, this is something I know, the pores in N95 masks that you can breathe through are greater than 0.3 microns. So the point being that even with an N95 mask, the virus is smaller than the openings in your mask. Now, then we go back to looking at cloth or paper mask. I don't have the exact size of those pores, but they're definitely larger than what's in an N95 mask. These are just facts. These are not my opinions. You know, somebody asked me recently, well, you know, if masks don't work, why do surgeons wear them? You know, keep in mind that surgical masks were developed to prevent the greatest enemy in an operating room, which is bacteria. And I just want to point out that bacterial size ranges from 0.4, which is larger, to 3 microns. They're pretty large compared to viruses are on the order of 1,000 times smaller than bacteria on average. And in fact, if you go to Walgreens, some of the boxes of surgical masks that you can buy for yourself at Walgreens say on the box, does not prevent viral transmission, because they don't. Now, these are just facts. Let's just talk about what happens with, and you know, there were also studies, just real quickly, there were studies that looked at this early in 2020 because everybody was promoting wearing masks, and so several universities decided, well, this would be a good thing to study. And I was able to find a paper published in April of 2020 in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And the determination of that paper was that neither surgical nor cotton mask effectively filtered SARS-CoV-2 during coughs by infected patients. Basically what they did was they took people who were definitely sick, had symptoms, had tested positive for COVID. They had them cough they had Petri dishes that would support viral growth. And they had them cough on a bear on a Petri dish. They had them cough using a surgical paper mask. They had them cough using a cloth mask that you can buy now in the stores or make yourself. And it turned out that the amount of viral load on each of those dishes was the same. So, you know, there's a point to support the physics of viral transmission through barriers. The thing that was alarming to me about this study was, you know, we've been taught that masks were promoted also because of aerosols, right? We know it's aerosol. And we all saw the little graphics that were on TV commercials. They were on Facebook computers of people talking without a mask, and here's the aerosol droplets coming out of their mask, and then here's the mask on, and the aerosol droplets are not coming out. Well, in this study, they accidentally found that aerosols as large as 3 micrometers, much larger, were able to penetrate the mask, both kinds. And in fact, here's the killer, is that then they examined the masks themselves, and this was only after just a few minutes of wearing, 3 minutes tops. The contamination of the virus on the outside of the mask was greater than what was on the inside. So really, they don't work very well. And you can look at this statistically as well. As you might know, Sweden declined to do any mask mandates or any lockdowns. And of course, they were just vilified for that early on. Sweden, I've looked it up, population-wise, it's the same size as the state of Michigan. So currently in Sweden, the death rate was 14,000, supposedly death rate from COVID. In Michigan, it's 21,000. And Michigan was one of the states that had the most severe, what I would call actually draconian lockdown measures. So there's that. Now, the other thing is, the second point is that children really are not much at risk of COVID. We've heard testimony to the contrary, but I just want to say that from the CDC statistics, the mortality rate of people under age 17 is about 0.06, and that's of those infected. The infection rate also is similarly small. So you're looking at a pretty low risk. And as of last May in the United States, deaths in this age group tallied up to 9, 6 of them with underlying conditions. That data actually is from the WHO. So I don't believe children are at a great deal of risk from COVID or from the Delta variant, and I'll come back to that. My third point is that really asymptomatic spread is kind of a myth. It is so rare as to be a myth, and it's not been adequately documented. There's actually no scientific verification of asymptomatic spread of the virus. That means if you're not showing symptoms. Now, and there's interestingly certainly been no documentation so far of spread of the virus from recovered people. So unlike the 75% of people who got sick in, I think it was Princeton, Massachusetts, 75% of those people, it turned out, were vaccinated. Not surprising, not surprising. The vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting the virus. A vaccine prevents you, hopefully, from getting very sick when you come in contact with the virus. So it's not surprising that you might come in contact with the virus and you might give it to others if you're vaccinated. However, there have been no documented cases of anyone who got COVID and recovered from it and later gave it to someone else. None that I can find. So the fourth quick point I want to make is that I've done a lot of research on whether masks are safe for children. There was that Florida study. My notes that I brought today relate to a study in Germany. It was very recent. They looked at 25,930 children. Among those children, 68 of them reported breathing problems from having to wear a mask all day in school. The average wear of the mask was 4.5 hours a day. So 68% had breathing problems. 60% of parents agreed with that there were breathing problems that their children were experiencing. The parents reported for their children, 53% of them had headaches, 20% had episodes of dizziness, and more than 50% had learning impairment. So there is some risk, I think, to asking children to do this every day. And these things relate to hypercapnia, which is when you have too much, you're breathing in too much CO2. So it turns out that, you know, the mask does create, I mean, you don't wear it like glued to your face. There is a little bit of airspace in front of the mask, and that's just an ideal little capsule for hanging on to the CO2 that you're exhaling. And it's just a fact that you're going to rebreathe some of that CO2. So how much? Well, there were some studies that looked at that. Well, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm looking for that number. Yeah, here it is. So normally the amount of CO2 in a nice big open room like this, well, and outside in open air is going to be 0.04% CO2. In an enclosed room, it's usually going to be about 0.1%. The level that's considered safe is 0.2%. All right, so there was a controlled experimental study that was reported in the Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics recently. Let's see, it was June of this year. They measured 3 minutes continuous measurements for kids, young people wearing masks. They used, the mean age of children was 10.7. It was kids aged 6 to 17, 20 females, 25 males. What they found was the average amount of CO2 that was inhaled during those 3 minutes with the mouth and nose covered was 1.3 to 1.4%. So we're already getting above what's comfortable in 3 minutes. That was so, and school children on average in the US wear these masks for 270 minutes. So it's not surprising that in over 25,000 children in Germany, more than 60% of them were reporting breathing problems, headaches, dizziness, and an inability to concentrate in school. So my point there is that masks are not healthy. And that Florida study where they measured all the different type of bacteria that were found on the mask, you know, that was a pretty valid study too. And I won't bring that up because someone already has. My main point here is that you're here to represent your constituents, your voters. Your voters, some of them are parents. And I believe, I don't have children myself, but if I did, I really wouldn't want a school board making a decision that I feel would affect my children's health. I think that should be totally left up to parents. And along those lines, so many of you in here are wearing a mask, and that's fine. I'm not here to convince you to not wear your mask. I'm giving you the facts as I know them and the research that I've found. But you shouldn't be imposing that on other people. It's been stated several times that we have a constitution, we have individual rights, and parents are the best people to decide what's best for their children. I'm going to ask you to consider not passing that responsibility on to people who are not the parents of those individual children. I'm happy to answer any questions.
We do have a question. Representative Dodson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're kind of to your left here.
Hi.
So I find myself intrigued by some of your data, and I missed, what was your name again? I'm sorry.
Kathleen Ray.
And what's your occupation?
I'm a biomedical engineer. I do consulting right now. I have been a research scientist at UAMS, at Tulane University, at Swinburne University in Melbourne, Australia. I've taught, I've been a professor at UALR and UCA.
I notice you have a lot of notes. It looks like they're written down. Is there any place that all of these are compiled together that you could share with us? Because this information is the most concise I've heard.
I'd be happy to email you, make it a little more legible. This is kind of my scribbles I did this morning and last night. Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to email you what I've presented today. And in fact, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to help you find answers to those.
Excellent. And then finally, in your opinion, you seem to be very knowledgeable about this.
Yes, she does.
If a child's wearing a mask and they're exposed to a child not wearing a mask, are they protected?
Well, in my opinion, your mask does not protect you against viruses. I'm sorry, that's actually not my opinion. That's the physics of the size of viruses versus the size of the pores in your mask. There's also data supporting that wearing a mask is not healthy. It's the CO2 accumulation and the bacterial contamination and these types of things. So I don't think it buys you anything to wear one, but I do think that people, a lot of people don't make decisions necessarily on data or what I would consider logic. People make decisions based on their feelings about things and what feels right for them. So I don't deny anybody's right to choose to wear a mask.
Someone wearing a mask versus someone not wearing a mask, it offers no greater protection or less protection, but it kind of gives you peace of mind.
Right.
Thank you.
We do have another question. Representative Bentley, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you. I'm up here. Thank you so much for being here and sharing us some good data. We're all concerned about our constituents, especially our kids. So since you've done some research and we're seeing that masks aren't effective, can you tell us some things that might be effective for kids that we could share on to help stop the spread of this? Because we'd really love to see some stopping.
You know, that's a tough one. The thing is, the current data, I mean, really, as you probably realize, we're pretty much over the hump on the alpha variant, on the original variant. And the truth is that this virus followed the pattern of just about every other virus that's ever been on the planet as far as the infection rate, you know, the peak. What we did with the shutdowns and the social distancing was we moved that peak over a bit and drug it out. But the thing that actually happened was it was probably the same number of infections that we were going to get if we'd done nothing. I mean, just based on the mathematics of the numbers I've seen. Now, how do you protect children? Well, the data support right now that the Delta variant is quite contagious on the level of, say, chickenpox. Now, I'm 61, and I don't know how, you know, you guys, I had chickenpox in kindergarten, and you may or not remember it's highly contagious if you're not vaccinated, which we weren't back then. And, you know, in kindergarten, one kid got it, and it went all the way around the room, one to the next, because it's highly contagious. So that's true. The question is it dangerous? So the data that we got from day one of when CDC started collecting and reporting data, to me indicated that there's very, very little danger to young people for even the original highly virulent alpha variant. And the data now we're seeing is that the Delta variant is less dangerous even to adults. This is statistically, I'm just looking at the numbers. So my feeling is somebody, I don't know if it was you, but somebody mentioned, you know, why don't we just let children develop natural immunity? And I'm all for that. It's more effective. And let me, you know, if I can talk another minute, a question has come up about the vaccine versus natural immunity. In fact, a medical representative here today stated that the vaccine was more effective than natural immunity. And personally, I think that's incorrect. Everything I've read, everything I know from my studies in immunology and all the research that I have done, both prior to this active research and then the reading I've done, is incorrect. Once you get a virus and you overcome it, what has happened in your body is that you have, of course, developed antibodies. Now, people are saying, oh, you know, the antibodies, they are less apparent, you know, they're less available after a certain amount of time. Well, of course they are. I mean, do you really think that for every single cold, every single flu, chickenpox, everything you've ever had in your life, that you still have that same high level of antibodies floating around. I mean, what you do have is you have memory T cells, and their job is to recognize when you see that antigen again, when you see that danger again, and then call up and start producing those antibodies, those soldiers, to go to battle against that virus. This is how your immune system works in a very simplified version. So here's my point. If you got the virus and you got over it, there's a 100% chance that you developed antibodies. I hope you'll agree with that. And of course that you have these great T cells, which, you know, they're just waiting to help you out there. If you got the vaccine, the data coming back from the three main vaccines, the chances are somewhere between 60 and 90%, I'm going to say 85%, that you have antibodies. Because as we know, vaccines are not perfect. Your body that fought off the virus, that's 100%. Your vaccine's not 100%. That's one thing. The second thing is, as I just stated, the job of the vaccine is to keep you from getting really sick. It's not a magic bullet to keep you from not getting the virus. That's not how they work. Depending on your immune system, depending on how well your vaccine is working, depending on your general health, whether you've got risk factors, lots of things in there. That's all going to depend. That's all going to affect how well you overcome the virus, even if you're vaccinated. So saying that vaccination is a better tool than natural immunity, I completely disagree with that.
Could I do one real fast follow-up, Chairman?
Real quick, we've got other questions.
All right, real quick. So just, would you say that...
Well, we've been listening into the meetings here and questions from